Hi, everyone. If you can please take your seats, we're about to get started. Thank you. So first off, welcome to International Women's Day, the Scovan's Executive Forum, our 4th anniversary of hosting this event. First, I'd like to introduce Donovan Nielsen, the president of Scovan, for the welcome speech.
Imagine a gender-equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge women's equality. Collectively, we can break the bias. Welcome, everyone, to Scovan's 2022 edition of International Women's Day. Isn't it nice to finally be back together in a room without wearing masks? Feels like it's been a long time, and in many ways it feels like signaling of what hopefully is turning the page on COVID. So while we are here today to recognize and celebrate women, by coincidence, this event also has acted as bookends to a challenging 2 years. In many ways, COVID has been a blur. It feels like a lifetime has passed since we last gathered here in person in 2020, and yet I remember the conversations we had here as if it was yesterday. It was literally 2 years ago today when commodity prices dropped and when COVID started to take over. It was after this event where we were going to host clients at a hockey game 2 days later, and the Flames canceled that game. That was like the first real realization that this COVID thing is real. If they're going to cancel hockey, this must be serious. And then on March 13th, only 2 days afterwards, Scovan hosted a party in celebration of our 10-year anniversary. And in many ways, it felt like the last real hurrah before COVID. You know what? And there's still many people that were at that party that I've only connected with in Zoom since that meeting, and it's been a full 2 years. But like they said, don't worry. COVID will only be a couple weeks. We'll hunker down, and then we'll all be over. I may be the only person you've heard to ever say this, but there are actually aspects of what happened over the last 2 years that positively impacted me, and that in some ways I actually miss. But don't get me wrong, I don't wish COVID, or I wish COVID hadn't happened. I know it's had a tremendous impact on people and their lives, but it created scenarios where we had to dig in, where we had to work hard, we had to figure things out, and we really had to lean on each other and rely on each other. And in many ways, those aspects of COVID were special to me. Simple things like waking up and going to work was a new and exciting challenge. Staying late, in some ways, felt like a blessing. Staying late at work, don't tell my wife that. But then at the same time, I was grateful when I came home to my family. It was the simple things like I started to walk to work and become more active. It was exciting to order food or takeout from Earl's and eat it at home with my family. I remember even logging in my calendar, watching these like concerts on TV that were recorded with the artists' phones, like stuff we would never think about doing, but for some reason during COVID, it was special. And we found joy in the little things like escaping to the lake and playing rock band with my kids. And fortunately now, because of that, they know all the rock classics, which is definitely a good skill to have. Now restrictions are being lifted, the energy in Calgary is returning, and we are back to meeting in person to celebrate and forge women's equality. The IWD 2022 campaign theme is Break the Bias, and Scovan's theme for today is Courage. I only recall a few times in my lifetime where the world changed almost instantly upon a world event. The 9/11 attacks just over 20 years ago, COVID, which I just mentioned 2 years ago, and now the conflict in Ukraine. And we bill it to 17-year-old kid from Kiev in our home, so the world events taking place right now are very real to us. Things are nuts right now, but amongst all this craziness and busyness that we are experiencing, we can't forget to take the time to reflect and play our part in a better world. ESG, equality, justice, and more. Things are hectic right now, but we want to be intentional to ensure that we don't lose focus on what's important long term. Marked annually on March 8th, Women's Day is one of the most important days of the year to celebrate women's achievements, raise awareness about women's equality, lobby for accelerated gender parity, and fundraise for female-focused charities. Just a few facts about women posted by the UN and the impact their changing world is having on them. So 70% of the 1.3 billion people living in conditions of poverty are women. In urban areas, 40% of the poorest households are headed by women. Women predominate in the world's food production at a range of about 50 to 80%, and yet they own less than 10% of the land. 80% of the displaced by climate-related disasters and changes around the world are women and girls, and violence against women has actually worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think, needless to say, we still have some work to do. So let's continue to work together for a gender-equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, and one where we are removing barriers instead of creating new ones. And let's do our part to create a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So I want to say a special thank you to all the sponsors that helped make this event possible. I'm not going to name them all, but their logos will be on the screen, and without them, this event wouldn't be possible. And it also takes a lot of time and effort, and there's been a number of volunteers that have helped, and I'm sure they'll be mentioned a few times today, but specifically Hannah, Joanne, Kareem, Lindsay, Michelle, Olivia, and Valerie. Thanks for all your help in planning today's session. And a kind and warm welcome to our special guest today, Mary, Shelley, and Kirsten, and for sure to the Blackfoot Tech Council. And with that, I would like to welcome to the stage Jeanette Many Guns to provide the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. Hoki, everyone. My name is Misamo Boyaki. I'm a member of the Siksika Nation, Blackfoot. I would like to say a few words on the Blackfoot Confederacy, our traditional boundaries, our relationship to our ancient environment with our Creator. The Blackfoot Confederacy consists of 4 Blackfoot-speaking tribes, the Siksika, Gana, Bigani, and Amskapi Bigani, located in Browning, Montana. The 4 tribes have similar beliefs, traditions, customs, language, religion, and creation stories. Our traditional territory for 10,000s of years extended over a vast land base and considered one of the largest. Our boundary of our traditional territory is described as follows. Starting from the North Saskatchewan River, to the east towards Winnipeg, Manitoba, to the south, the Wyoming-Montana border, and the west into the Rocky Mountains, known to the Blackfoot as the backbone of the world. The Blackfoot Confederacy tribes resided around the traditional boundaries of our territories and were protected by our brave warriors. Our boundaries were fiercely defended to whoever attempted to encroach into our territory. Many battlefields that have been forgotten by the immigrants that live here today, but know that the Blackfoot had a reputation to protect its territory lands and were widely known as the Lord of the Plains. The Blackfoot women you see here today all come from great and brave women, from great warriors that fought to keep our territory from the enemies from all directions. For thousands of years, our Blackfoot territory was made up of Blackfoot-named rivers, lakes, creeks, and Blackfoot names for the different mountains and hills. We had Blackfoot names for everything. We have maintained our ancient stories that are tied to our traditional territory. Many of the natural symbols that exist today within the landscape of our traditional territory were gifts from the Creator, such as the sleeping buffalo located in Banff, the Majorville medicine wheel, the Chief headdress located in Cypress Hills, Chief Mountain located in Montana. Other natural symbols within the landscape were residue of our Blackfoot creation story, such as the Big Rock located in Okotoks, As well, the mountains, rivers, ravines, lakes, and the various stars, all created in relation to the Blackfoot creation story by the creator, Napi. There are many other natural symbols that still exist. Our ancient lands have not been forgotten by the Blackfoot tribes, and today we are still protecting our territory by protecting our environment. On behalf of myself and the other Blackfoot women here, we welcome you into the Blackfoot territory. For my ancestors,
Thank you, Jeanette, for that wonderful acknowledgement. I wasn't ready for that last part. So I wanted to thank everyone for being here today. My name's Valerie Stewart. I'm the VP of Strategy and Development for Scovan Engineering. We are streaming live on YouTube today, so to all of us joining us virtually, hello, and we're happy to have you join us as well. Also, for those in the audience, we will be showing virtually, and here we have slido.com, which will show you the links afterwards, so you can participate in questions for the panelists later on in the presentation. And again, first off, I'd like to thank our committee members for putting this together. I really appreciate all the work that you've put into this. We couldn't do it without everybody's support, and I'm always so impressed and blown away by everyone's commitment and ability and willingness to just jump right in and support an event like this. So we have a fantastic event lined up for you today. So to our speakers, Kirsten, Shelley, and Mary, I'm so grateful for your dedication, your commitment, and your time, and your willingness to share your personal stories with us. I have to say, actually, our conversations and just preparing for today have already been so enlightening and inspiring for me. It's just been an incredible source of inspiration, so I know that you guys are in for a really great treat. So we are here today to amplify social connectedness, celebrate trailblazers and visionaries, and create opportunity for the future of girls and women. While we have some incredible speakers here today, International Women's Day is also about the everyday heroes. There's so many amazing female leaders among us, quietly pushing boundaries, inspiring others, challenging the status quo. And we see you, and we applaud you for all your accomplishments. We want to create a community that recognizes women for the personal and professional triumphs that they make each and every day. So when I was preparing this speech, my 8-year-old daughter, Stella, asked me what I was working on. I told her I was preparing for International Women's Day. Then I asked her, why do you think it's important that we celebrate International Women's Day? She thought about it and she said, well, in the olden days, the boys had all the good jobs because people thought they were smarter than girls. So I was struck by two things: her confidence and belief that this was a thing of the past and that her future would be different. So she's partly right, but at the same time, we're not quite all the way there yet. So how do I explain to my vibrant, confident, and fierce little girl that by the age of 10, she's going to stop putting her hand up in class because girls don't want to be known as know-it-alls? Societal norms for young girls are powerful, and it's so deep-rooted in something so much bigger than us. Those belief systems are and should be a thing of the past, and it's up to every one of us to change that. Every time we push outside our comfort zones, call out biases, and speak our voice, we get a little bit better as a society. That's why representation is so critical. We need to show our girls that they too can lead, that they can influence, that they can sit at the table. Our youth need to see it, to believe it, to become it. We need to show our girls that they too can lead. And one example of that is Sheryl Sandberg. She's one of those leaders who's made a tremendous impact on society. During her 10 years as COO for Facebook, she became one of the most successful and wealthiest women in the business world. But she did more than that. At Stanford, Berkeley, and other universities in California, something very interesting started to happen. Young women started applying for business school in greater numbers. And their source of inspiration in their application letters was Cheryl. They saw themselves in her. They believed that they too could be leaders of a startup company in Silicon Valley. And they made a conscious decision to lean into their career choice that they may not have otherwise chosen. Belief becomes your reality. So let's make more leaders for our daughters, sisters, and granddaughters. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Break the Bias. I love this theme. But as we started talking about it, we said, well, what does that actually mean? How do we do that? So what does that mean? Does it mean that we need to break stereotypes? Does it mean to take grit, determination, and hard work? Does it mean we need to be aware of unconscious biases? I believe it's a combination of all those things. But when I truly thought about the essence of it, we came up with this, which was courage. I believe it really means to be courageous. So today, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the courage to lead, the courage to try something new, the courage to speak up, and the courage to be financially independent. Many of you have been breaking the bias all of your lives without even realizing it. You may have been the only girl on your sports team, or been one of the 20% of female graduates in your engineering class. You may have been the only female working on site, the only female in the boardroom. Whatever it is, you've been courageous, and you've gotten used to the scenery along the way. Today, our speakers are going to share their stories with us on how they've been courageous throughout their lives, through their challenges and triumphs. And we'll share some of their lessons learned with us and some valuable key takeaways. But before I continue on, I really want to say how incredibly privileged we are to be having this discussion today. We're discussing issues at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're sitting here feeling protected, safe, with access to our basic needs. However, on the other side of the globe, there's a devastating war going on. Millions of people have lost their homes in the Ukraine, and they're evacuating just to save their lives. Yet, among this terror, there's been some bravery, courage, and heroism. Olena Zelenska is the Ukraine's first lady. She's only 44 years old, which is hard to believe that the situation that she's leading right now with a young family and her husband. She's an architect and a screenwriter, and she's been a voice of leadership for her people throughout this attack. In the eye of the storm, she's stayed by her husband's side in Kiev as they've refused to leave their country and their people. The First Lady has been using social media to rally her nation and send messages of solidarity. She's known for her causes of gender equality and supporting children's nutrition. But just after first days of the attack, she posted this to her people. I will not panic and have tears. I will be calm and I'll be confident. My children are looking at me, and I will be next to them and next to my husband, and together with you. I love you, Ukraine. In a country that has 2 million more women than men, the resistance has taken on a new meaning. It has a particularly feminine face. Ms. Zelenska expressed admiration for the women fighting in the armed forces and praised the women who take children to shelters every day without panic and entertain them with games just to protect their minds from the war. And she recognizes women who are giving birth in bomb shelters, determined to carry out and bring life amongst death. It's incredible to see these women in these numbers taking up arms and fighting for their country. This is the face of the war of Ukraine, and this is courage. This is breaking the bias. So now we're going to get started with our main event. Blackfoot Tech Council is our nonprofit organization. We're pleased to be able to donate to our net proceeds to the Blackfoot Tech Council. This year, Blackfoot Tech is a Siksika-led initiative that aims to ensure equitable access to information and technology for all Siksika people. The group's purpose is to honor tradition while evolving and developing new tech to empower their communities. So I'd like to welcome Jennifer Kohlhammer and members of the Blackfoot Tech Council and trainees from their capacity building program.
Thank you, Val. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer. Thank you so much for having us today. It's an honor to be here and to be sharing the stage with women like this. You are truly courageous, and it's an inspiration just to be standing next to you all. So thank you so much. So, and thank you, Jeanette, for the land acknowledgement earlier. That was an excellent way to start today in a good way. I'd like to also just take a moment to thank members of our Siksika Nation leadership who have been supportive of this cause and our initiative in leading programs and projects for technology advancement on Siksika Nation, specifically our tribal manager, Richard Sparvier. So thank you so much to them. As Val mentioned, we're here today from Siksika Nation. It's a First Nations community that is located about 100 kilometers east of Calgary. And it's actually the second largest First Nation community in Canada and home to the Blackfoot people, as Jeanette was speaking to earlier. It's the namesake of our group, the Blackfoot Tech Council, which is who we are here to represent today. I'd like to just take a really brief moment to introduce those of us who are in our presence. So our women are sitting up front here. We've got Margaret Cargard. If you want to stand up, and live stream is over here, so make sure you give them a wave. We've got Lynn Pantherbone, Amanda Medicine Shield, Jeanette Manyguns. And I'd also like to give a shout out to some of the guys in our group who are here to support us as well. We've got them sitting in the back. We've got David Pantherbone, Zach Springchief, Desmond Slay, and Gary Morton, who's on the camera today. And then, of course, Gayleen and myself. So the Blackfoot Tech Council was formed in response to long-standing IT challenges on Siksika Nation, specifically inequitable internet access and speeds. It was also formed out of the recognition of the inherent strengths of the Blackfoot people in information and communications technologies. In the words of the chief of Siksika Nation, Ori Crowfoot, First Nations people have been innovators in technology for millennia. Our group's purpose is to honor tradition while evolving and developing new technology to empower all of our communities. We're a nonprofit volunteer group that is comprised of Siksika Nation's IT specialists, the majority of whom are Siksika Nation members. We came together with a shared conviction that a coordinated effort for Siksika by Siksika would be essential for the creation of a healthy digital ecosystem that will allow Siksika Nation to thrive. We have a few key objectives. First and foremost, to increase and build our capacity through ongoing training and knowledge sharing. And 4 of the women that are here with us today are actually trainees from our current IT training and capacity building program. To build and develop the infrastructure that's needed to make consistent high-speed broadband internet available to every single home, business, facility, and square inch, quite frankly, on Siksika Nation. To encourage and support next-generation IT and tech leaders in the community. And this last objective very intentionally includes the expansion of including women within IT and tech sector. A couple of examples of ways that we're doing this. We are role modeling the visibility of women in tech through our participation in the Blackfoot Tech Council. We're creating supportive opportunities for capacity building and mentorship for other women to join in this endeavor. And then those individuals can show up and contribute everything that they are in terms of being women and as tech professionals. I'd like to now introduce my colleague Gayleen to share a few words from her perspective.
Okay, and good afternoon. First, I'd like to give thanks for invitation and acknowledgement to this year's theme, International Women's Day event, Break the Bias. I am currently an IT student with CompTIA and Siksika, participating and experiencing firsthand trials and errors of a junior IT student at the Siksika Support Center with Siksika Health Services located on the nation. In today's event, we share many stories of bias and discrimination, but as a First Nation woman, this is nothing new but real life experiences. I've learned that we overcome such barriers and stay committed to our strength, our work, our knowledge, and continue to strive in our belief. Our struggles do not define us and never will, but only make us stronger and more resilient. To only move forward believing and knowing bias and discrimination cannot break us. Thank you, and back to Jen.
Thank you, Gayleen. And so one of the primary goals of this year's International Women's Day is to improve equality for women in tech. We agree with this goal. This is crucial for now and for future generations. Amongst the many things that I have learned while living and working amongst Siksika Nation is that in every decision that is made, we must consider the next 7 generations. As the presence and the impact of technology continues to grow rapidly, we need both women and men to make these kinds of decisions. Could you imagine the impact of artificial intelligence in 5 to 10 years from now if it's developed primarily by young and middle-aged men? That could be a pretty consequential bias transfer. This is a time for action for us to break the bias against women in tech. Thank you again. We would invite you to please come and speak to any one of us following today's event. We're the ones in the matching Tech Whisper jackets. And for those that are tuning in online, thank you so much for joining us. There will be a link for you to connect in social media on Scovan social media sites in days to come. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Graytrix. I am the accounting coordinator with Gemini Fabrication. And I am pleased to spend International Women's Day with all of you and to hear everybody's stories. Thank you. Our first keynote speaker is sponsored by the Intrepid Group. Intrepid Group is an Alberta-based organization aligned with world-class manufacturers to provide extraordinary service, quality equipment, and solutions to enhance their clients' businesses. Intrepid Group believes in supporting the community through their volunteer activities and supports diversity and inclusion in the energy industry. Kirsten Marcia is both a professional geoscientist and a resource entrepreneur. For the last 10 years, she has been the pioneer and key driving force behind the development of Canada's soon-to-be geothermal power generation site. She is the founder, president, and CEO of Deep Earth Energy Production, a private company focused on developing geothermal resources to meet Saskatchewan's and Canada's increasing energy needs with sustainable baseload renewable power and industrial heating applications. Most recently, Kirsten was a recipient of the 2022 Canada's Clean 50 Award for her inspiring, tireless leadership in the category of renewable energy.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Michelle. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be part of this day and celebrating with you. Thank you to Scovan for this great opportunity. I'm proud to be here. I come from Treaty 6 territory, and I'm so honored to feel so welcome to be here today on Treaty 7. Well, we're gonna have some fun. Let's dive in. Courage and breaking gender bias. These are such great themes, and I'll admit that I struggled a bit to get prepared for this presentation. You do corporate presentations, that's one thing, but then being forced to do some reflection and looking in and diving to think about what we want to chat about today was not easy for me. So thanks, Val. But on that reflection, I did come up with some ideas and some stories and some insights that I'm going to have some fun sharing with today. When it comes to the theme of courage, from my perspective, if fighting your way out of corners, if making lots and lots of mistakes, having to do things over and over and over again, make some sort of courage, well, then I've got a couple of stories to share. But let's first talk about energy diversification. This takes courage. Within the Canadian context, geothermal got left behind as we were developing wind and solar projects. It's part of the fact that it's expensive. You can't set up a simple monitoring device to figure out whether or not there's a geothermal resource, several thousand kilometers or a few kilometers down below the ground. You have to drill expensive wells just at the time when there's a lot of risk in the project, which is a really tricky scenario to try to attract the investment dollars. So high risk and high cost is a tricky balance. Deep struggled for many, many years to advance this project in fits and starts. And it wasn't until there was a brave Calgary investor that had the courage to bet on this project. And I suppose also on me. Through his investment, we drilled our discovery well, a 3.5-kilometer well down to the base of the Williston Basin, right through all the oil and gas and right past it and sailed down to search for hot water. What if, despite all the years of research, scoping, and homework, we drilled a duster? What if it wasn't as hot as we predicted? What if I screwed it all up? I remember the evening in December 2018. We were on the verge of just getting the initial results out of that initial well. And I got a call from the site engineer. And he said to me, Kirsten, if you're looking for an ocean of hot water, well, you just drilled a gusher. It was such a moment of profound relief. There was champagne that night, I can tell you that. And we laughed because had I been an oil and gas geologist here in Calgary and I got excited about drilling a water well, I would have been mega fired. but that wasn't the case. We know that this industry is a fledgling industry. It's going to have lots of learning, lots of optimization. But it took courage and risk by a few key people early on to get this project going. It took that investor's unbiased belief and view that me, as a woman, had the ability and the skills to lead this brand new Canadian industry. So I tried to string together some themes into my presentation. So the first of those themes is I believe that young girls and young women really need to see more women in courageous leadership roles. My mom was born in 1940 in Kelvington, Saskatchewan, a farming community, home to many hockey legends and many NHLers. I think most people born in Kelvington were born with wearing skates already. Well, unfortunately, my mom got polio when she was a child. It's a terrible disease that affects the spinal cord and can cause paralysis. In the absence of modern physiotherapy, the town doctor, Dr. Warren, used skating as a way of helping these kids rehabilitate those damaged muscles and nerves. Not only did my mom have the courage to try this weird way of physiotherapy, but she became a great skater and went on to train in figure skating in Vancouver. Imagine that adventure in 1955 from Kelvington heading out to the West Coast. It must have been very exciting. But think of the lack of bias that Dr. Warren had when he spent time rehabilitating those girls and spending as much time as he did, just as he was spending time rehabilitating those boys who had a future of maybe being NHL stars. That took courage. Her mother, my grandmother, who considered herself very, very fortunate to get a grade 8 education, thought it was very important that her children, her daughters, were financially independent. All 4 girls became registered nurses, career women. In my mom's retirement, after 50 years being a nurse, she started up and purchased one of Saskatchewan's largest self-storage facilities and also opened a toy store. I mean, that's courage, right? This is, from Kelvington to being an entrepreneur. No golf retirement for my mom. I remember her saying to me, as mothers, we need to be role models for young women so that each generation can stretch a little further. These generations of women before us had so much courage, and they didn't even realize it. My parents always wanted to expose us kids to interesting people and our interesting experiences. We got to meet politicians, toured our enormous Esteban coal drag lines, got to meet some Olympians. When Al Oming from Edmonton was touring schools with a cheetah from his wildlife facility, my mom invited him for lunch. So I had Al Oming in my house and a cheetah. Like that's the kind of parents I had. Just always trying to find for those unique scenarios. One particular memory as a teenager was a trip to Regina to meet Saskatchewan's first female lieutenant governor, the Honorable Sylvia Fedorik. Fedorik was born from a modest Ukrainian immigrant family in small-town Saskatchewan. She achieved a degree in physics from the U of S in 1949, right after World War II, and which followed very shortly after with a master's. Among many accomplishments, she was involved in the development of the world's first nuclear medicine machine to successfully use targeted radiation to treat cancer in a patient. She earned the Order of Canada, and she was inducted into Canada's Curling Hall of Fame. In Saskatchewan, it's debatable which is a greater honor. At this Regina event, I remember my mom encouraging me to go introduce myself, go say hi to Sylvia Fedorik, and like a mama bird, encouraging her awkward, teenager out of the nest. I was shy. Okay, well, not very shy, but in that moment I felt quite shy. She was a formidable woman. And eventually when I got up the courage to say hello, I had a wonderful conversation. I don't remember what we talked about, but what I do remember is how normal she was, how kind of person she was. And that's what had an impact on me. So meeting her as Saskatchewan's most prominent leader had impact because she didn't come from a background of special privilege in order to achieve her accomplishments. She wasn't some kind of royalty. She was a determined Ukrainian Saskatchewan girl. Sylvia had the courage to get degrees in physics and all the rest in a time when she would have been very alone as a woman in her peers. So for International Women's Day, cheers to the generations of women before us who did a huge amount of great work and a lot of heavy lifting. But as Val said, there's still a lot of work to do. My second theme is I believe we need to raise our sons and daughters from a very early age to equally as children. If we want them to treat genders equally as adults, they need that initial foundation. As a kid, I remember my parents running a household and raising me and my 3 older brothers. I really don't remember being treated any differently. It was pointed out that I was the only one that didn't get hand-me-downs, which was quite nice. I don't remember us kids having special girl chores or boy chores. My brothers had to wash the dishes and clean the bathrooms, just like I had to cut the grass and stain the fence. I was lucky. I grew up believing that gender equality was normal. It was all I ever knew. I really believe that that's essential. That's just as much as girls, that boys need to have early assumptions that we are all equal players here. In my career, I've had a few wake-up calls that this was not the same background for everyone. One story that makes me kind of laugh with disbelief is I had an awesome job as a summer student working up north, and we had the opportunity to work at a mine for a few weeks. Most of the work that we were doing was surface geology mapping, but we were also rewarded with this super cool underground time where you could actually see the rocks in 3D. My first day or two underground was amazing. Being an underground mine is so cool. You're bouncing, you're driving down in a circle in a Jeep. You then scramble down a series of ladders, relying on your headlamp to guide the way and hoping that you had the dexterity not to fall on your face. On about day 3, I was told that they wanted me and my female colleague to stop and continue our work above ground instead of below ground. And I was like, what? I was confused. It took some time to find out the whole story, but it turned out that the mining industry back then had a long history of some kind of medieval superstition that women brought danger and bad luck to underground mining operations. thought they were joking. I thought it must be just because I wasn't doing a good job underground. They weren't joking. Now, I didn't fight this as a junior geologist at the time. And then the next time it happened a few years later, I did fight it. I lost, but at least I tried. Now in that same scenario today, I hope that my daughter would fight for her right to be there and be able to win. My third theme is embrace challenge. Don't be a quitter. I grew up in Estevan, Saskatchewan, the energy city of the province. You can't enter the town from any direction without seeing the signs. Thank you for that. It's a community originated in oil and gas, in agriculture, then oil and gas, coal mining, and of course part of Southeast Saskatchewan's major energy hubs. Not that I cared or even noticed growing up. I had more important interests, like how high I can get my bangs to be in the 80s. When I graduated high school, I went directly to university, as did my older brothers, but then, unlike them, swiftly flunked out. I did have a very good time, but unfortunately the university didn't give me any credits for that. I went back home to Estevan and I waitressed in a bar. I was then able to chat with people working in the oil and gas industry, drillers, coal miners, power plant engineers. And my eyes suddenly opened up to all kinds of career options that giant-haired Kirsten didn't care about the year before. While waitressing, I took a night class in geology. It was so interesting. This kind of science made sense. You know, you could see it, you could feel it. It sparked my curiosity. Oh, and in geology, there might even be a reward of a job at the end of it all. So I went back to university at the U of S and jumped headfirst into geology. Loved it. There's a wonderful culture associated with geologists. It was fun, and I knew I had found a fit. I was fortunate. I got summer jobs working up north on geological mapping projects, some so remote that we had to rely on a plane to bring our groceries and our diesel to fuel our generators. This was definitely not a desk job career. When I graduated in 1999, gold bottomed at $265 an ounce, and oil dipped at $16 a barrel. Well, crap, like tear up degree. Not great timing. I somehow, through ringing doorbells and hitting every tower here in Calgary, managed to land a job as a well site geologist in the oil and gas industry. A year or so later, I got a call from a Saskatoon company called Shore Gold to help run some initial exploration in diamond drilling. And I asked, well, for what commodity? Because if you're drilling hard rock in the north, it's all called diamond drilling because it's diamond drill bits. When they said to me, Kirsten, diamonds, I said, what? Diamonds in Saskatchewan? Who would ever believe that one of the world's largest diamond fields deposits would be in Saskatchewan, of all places? Those are all diamonds. Things happen fast. Suddenly, I was a project manager for a company during the sexiest resource boom since the gold rush. It was a tight group of companies, and everyone knew each other, and Canada quickly became the highest value producer of diamonds by carat weight. We were raising capital like crazy and overnight developing one of the world's biggest diamond fields. It was the Wild West. It was the heyday. It was the excitement. You can imagine the vibe and the speed of things. I was in early and moved from spotting those initial exploratory holes to large sampling holes to eventually sinking a mine shaft and drifting kilometers throughout the deposit, exploring it. Okay, pause. I know I was talking about one theme here, but I'm going to jump to another because otherwise the timeline gets all screwed up. You'll figure out why. My fourth theme, and I'll come back, is the importance to support women navigating careers and family. My husband is one of those boys who was raised without bias, totally equal to his sister. And if you met his sister, I can assure you that if they hadn't, Rhonda would have corrected this. Scott and I got married while still in university, so that poor fellow's been with me through everything. So it's the mid-2000s. I'm in the middle of this new, sexy Canadian diamond resource industry, and just as I'm starting to make a bit of a name for myself and advance my career with some experience, I got pregnant. Well, I was excited to become a mom, but I was already regretting in advance the missing out on my career momentum. For Scott, it was a no-brainer for him to step back from his career and take a paternity leave. To be honest, he had the time of his life, and he got to be the stay-at-home dad, while I was able to be still the proud mom, but being able to work and travel with work. What would have happened if I hadn't had that opportunity, if Scott didn't have the courage to step back from his career for a year? The Boys Club has been a powerful club that women have had trouble busting into for years. When friendships are made outside of the office over a beer or coffee, that bond carries back into the office. One of the challenges for women is that traditionally, women have been the default nurturers of children. Now, I realize this is a broad generalization, but it's often been easier for men to go out for a beer after work with colleagues, leaving his partner to pick up the kids, get supper started, and start, taking kids to activities. Again, I was very lucky to my husband's support, as he understood that these after-hours relationships mattered in my career, and those bonds and friendships I made in a male-dominated industry helped propel my career forward. Okay, back to not being a quitter and embracing challenge. After Diamonds, I worked for several junior resource companies. I had by then earned some scars, had some experience, and when I was approached by Saskatchewan geologist Steve Halliburra with his idea that there might be a geothermal resource in Saskatchewan sufficient for power generation, it came at that perfect time where, I had a bit of experience, had some tools in my toolbox, and I was ready to sink my teeth into something new. I went for it. We raised the seed capital to find out if this crazy idea had any legs. It was supposed to be easy. This was the heyday of raising capital in the junior resource sector. It wasn't easy. It was hard. I was failing because I couldn't secure that larger investment that we required to fund this big exploration well. Really, the project was on the verge of falling into the valley of death. It was at that sticking point where the project had high risk and had high exploration cost. Very challenging to finance. I wanted to quit many times. It was too hard. I went for 4 years without any income, which was not great for my popularity ratings at home. It was stressful times, and yet I believed that if we could just get that investment, if we just had the chance to test that resource, we could back away off that cliff. Thanking again to the investors who had the courage to take that risk, to believe in me, and to allow us to try. My main takeaway in this presentation is I want to encourage women to have the courage to pivot mistakes into new opportunity. Wouldn't it be great if every plan worked out just as has been conceived on day one? This never happens in the real world. Plan A often turns into Z double prime. I believe that it's really important that every girl should have her plan A challenged in high school or early post-secondary education. Plan A might totally work and be awesome, but I want young women and girls to have the courage to pivot until she finds something that feeds her curiosity and challenge her if Plan A doesn't work out. I do have one piece of advice, and it's use your voice. Speak up. Women need courage to use their voices even when they aren't feeling 100% confident. I've seen it many, many times where, men have an idea that they've maybe just cooked up, maybe they're 50% confident in it, but have the courage to take that risk, to volley that idea into the mix. Whereas women wait till they're almost 100% confident and will hold back on that last 1% of fear, of risk, of not putting that idea forward. Have the courage to get your voice out there. Even if your idea isn't, for sure correct or not 100% fully cooked, somebody else might have that one idea that will that idea might crack the code for someone else and find a solution. It's called collaboration. Use your voice. Pick up the phone. Have the courage to talk to people. Even when they're far more experienced or seemingly too important to be bothered, they will respect you that you've had the courage to reach out and will almost always have time for you. A connection will be made. That goes for the same in the office. Don't be shy. When some executive comes into the coffee room, make contact. Say hi. Ask her or him how their day is going. A connection will be made. Thank you for this opportunity today, along with these fabulous women. And thank you to Scovan for inviting me here today and providing me the opportunity to use my voice. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. That was lovely. It was great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jane Kavanaugh. I'm VP of Product Innovation at Scovan, so I'm just up here to intro our next wonderful speaker. So the next speaker is sponsored by PTW. PTW is an industry-leading solutions provider delivering fabrication, construction, and maintenance services throughout a strategic network across North America. Their diverse workforce of over 2,000 direct hire specialists has extensive experience working on industrial projects of all sizes and scopes. PTW is an equal opportunity employer and hires individuals that align with their values, care, excellence, and passion, and who uphold their high standards for safety and quality. So I'm pleased to intro our next speaker, Shelley Kuipers. She is the co-founder and co-CEO of The 51. She's an activist in business, entrepreneurship, and investment, driving business models that are more equitable, diverse, corporately and ecologically sustainable. Shelley is a co-founder of Iovia and Adventure Capital, and previously founded a crowdsourcing company, Chaotix, and was a co-founder of Stormworks, which was acquired by Solium. Shelley is a co-founder and an active board member of sustainable direct-to-consumer clothing brand House Kuipers. That is a long list, Miss Shelley. As an avid brand leader and marketer, Shelley believes in the power of brand, community, and participation as a differentiator in newly emerging business models. Shelley has led global brands such as Lego, IKEA, Nike, and Unilever to be participative brands, companies, and business models to drive insights, ideas, and innovation. So help me welcome up Shelley.
Turn it on? Oh, that's good. Okay, cool. And I did say earlier I was going to try not to breathe too heavily into the mic. Thanks very much for the introduction and for pronouncing my name correctly, Shelley Kuipers. It's great to be here. Well, I guess I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so I've had a different path. I didn't do the traditional thing. In fact, I quit post-secondary school. So my path is a little bit different. Today, I co-run the 51, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. We're definitely breaking down the bias, and I was saying earlier that for the 51, this is our Super Bowl week. So we're like going mad on all of the social media to make sure that all of the statistics that we've heard so far are communicated over and over again. And yeah, I'm a grandmother. It's just so cool. And so I actually kind of I like to kind of move around when I'm talking, but so I grew up in northern Alberta on forest stations. My dad was a forest ranger. So it was a different upbringing in the way that we were always in the bush. We were always fossil hunting or on a canoe trip. But I did learn how to shoot a gun. And we would go hunting, which was interesting, especially when you brought that story to the big city. It wasn't really well understood. But ultimately, I actually wanted to be a fashion designer, and there's another part of my story that I'll get to on that as well. I took petroleum technology at SAIT. I hated it, absolutely hated it. I was supposed to be a petroleum engineer, and I said I wasn't going to do that. So I started working in upstream oil and gas, and I actually worked on a pipeline crew in northern Alberta, just south of Grand Prairie on the Wapiti River. So I've kind of done many different things. I've lived in Germany, in the UK, in the US. And I really found my way in my career by saying I really didn't want to be an engineer. I really didn't want to work in oil and gas. But I had the opportunity to work for a company called Phillips Petroleum. I'm sure you know of it. They hired me out of SAIT when the oil prices were terrible in 1987. So now you know how old I am. And they created a computer lab. And this computer lab was in the middle of the floor. I was the only woman on the floor that wasn't a secretary. And the guys on the floor, the engineers, said, we want you to go learn all the software because we can't figure it out or we don't have time. And, you know, to be honest, it's probably beneath us to figure out the software. So we will tell you what we need from the software, and we want you to go compute it with the software. And initially I was like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. I'll do that. But what I didn't realize was the power of computing until I actually tapped into it. So it was during the time when everything was shifting from a mainframe to a PC. And so we actually had PCs on our desk. And I know that sounds really weird, but that was a big deal in 1987 and 88. And so all of the software that was in the lab, it was downhole schematics, it was production economics, it was reservoir analysis, it was, you know, you name it. Everything on the upstream, I learned that software. And the software that was in the lab was like PSI Energy software. They actually had a product called AccuMap. So they hired me. I went and started to work with them. And I got pregnant. And so they said, oh, great, well, we're laying you off. And I was like, okay, great. So they laid me off from my job. And I went home and I started to raise my child. And then another company called Moran called me up and said, hey, would you come work with us? And Moran was a company that I grew up inside of. It was an energy software company, and we sold to Schlumberger in 1999. And it was really cool because I got to learn how to build a company from scratch. Everything, sales, marketing, product development, how to hire people, how to fire people, how to build a global company. When we sold, we were in 15 different locations globally. We had a software suite of more than 25 applications. Yeah, it was an amazing ride. We worked our asses off. We thought it was our own company. I didn't actually have equity in the company, but I benefited from that transaction. In 1998, as part of that process, I had an opportunity to invest in a company called Peyto Exploration. And I don't know if you know that company from way back, but it was actually a darling in the energy industry. So all of that has kind of led me to becoming an entrepreneur. That's what I've done over and over again since 1999. I learned how to do it, and then I went out and did it myself. So today I'm an entrepreneur, an investor. Yes, I'm married. I'm a grandmother, and I'm co-running the 51 with Judy Fairburn. So there's 5 things that kind of guided me in my career, and as you can probably tell, because my path wasn't linear, I didn't really pine after the picket fence. That wasn't my thing. But I think what was really key for me was this desire to do things differently and better. So it was always challenging the status quo. I was always the rebel rouser in the room. I was always saying we could do things differently. The other aspect I would say, especially without a university degree in hand, you had to have fortitude. You had to be confident in the room. I didn't have a university degree, but I was smart and I could figure things out. The third thing, well, maybe I'll skip around here a bit, but the third thing is really charting a vision. So as an entrepreneur, that's your job. You have to paint a vision of what's possible. It's a version of the world that does not yet exist. You have to hire a team and you have to go raise capital. And so to do that, you actually need to be really brave. We talked about courage, but you have to be brave because you're going to walk into the arena and everyone's going to go, you can't do it. And then fifth, what I would say is focus on your strengths. I know we've been taught to work on our weaknesses. I'm actually the complete opposite. I'm like, leave them at the door. Don't work on them. Work on the things that you're really, really good at because they will be your superpower. So if I kind of just update you, am I going the wrong way? There. So I've had some success. I've built companies. We've exited companies. There's been failure and success through that career path. But today I actually have an opportunity to run a family office with my husband and my 2 adult sons, which is really cool. We had success in the technology community, and what we did was we very quickly turned around and started investing in other entrepreneurs, kind of in our own backyard. And to date, we've deployed more than $25 million in capital into the Calgary community. The other company that I actively am part of, and I talked a little bit about it already, is a company that works with large brands globally where we actually help them design and develop open participation models. So how can you bring your customers inside of your company? How can you drive insights, ideas, and innovation? And how can you actually build new business models with your customers? And so we work with large brands like IKEA, Lego, Unilever, and others in helping them do this. I'll give you an example of one of the projects that we've done, and we're still working with them. We work with Lego. It's a community called Lego Ideas. Consumer fans from all over the world can submit ideas to Lego. Lego works with those consumers to co-create those ideas. And then Lego gives the proceeds, 1% of the proceeds of that product to the idea generator for the time that it's on the shelf. Lego has made millionaires out of that community, and that community has had a positive P&L since launching as a marketing initiative. So that's what we do at these brands. We basically get them to bring the outside world inside of their company and innovate new products and services. And I actually did do fashion design. So at age 52, this is my 55th year. I launched a fashion brand. It's a sustainable fashion brand out of Vancouver. We source the textiles from Vancouver. We make the clothing there, and we sell it online. We also have the opportunity to use the Shopify platform, which is a Canadian company. It's now a public company, but I did the fashion thing after all. But my current BFF is the 51. And so I had a dear friend, Alice Reimer. She was someone that I invested in as a tech entrepreneur, and she invested in me. And we had some success throughout that journey together. But what we noticed was there was never any women as investors in the room. So if we were to go pitch our company, we would be in pitching to guys. Likewise, if we were going to a pitch, because we now had capital to invest, there were no women investors at the table. So we created the 51 specifically to break this down. We wanted to specifically invite women to the table to be investors in early stage companies, and we specifically want to invest in women-led, co-led companies. We got our start in March 2019. I'll go to the next slide here. We got our start in March 2019, 75 women in my kitchen. We put an entrepreneur in the middle of the room. We said, don't pitch, tell us your story. She successfully raised $500,000 from the women in the room, and the 51 was born. What was really interesting was we had a very strong reaction in the room. We had some women that said, where have you been? This is amazing. We had other women in the room that said, I do not use the word feminism. And we were like, okay, we know that people care. They either care not to be involved with us or they care to be involved with us. So we knew that we had the attention of the market. And so this is what we're doing. We're building the financial feminist community. We're building the financial feminist economy. It's a phrase that we coined. And what that means is if we drive more equitable participation economically, there is so much upside for Calgary, for Alberta, and Canada. The statistics are quite staggering. I don't know if you know this statistic, but 65% of all of Canada's wealth will be in the hands of women by the end of this decade. There's a major wealth transfer underway. So what's happening is the older generation, what we call the boomers, money is now being left to the woman in the family. And another additional statistic that's really powerful is that Gen Z is going to be the greatest benefactor of this wealth transfer as a kind of a segment of the population. So again, women are going to be in charge of a large amount of wealth in Canada, but we are not very well equipped commercially or financially. There's a huge gap. We talk to women every day who say, I've never invested before. I don't even know how to. My husband invests on my behalf. And so that's something that we're really trying to change. Last year was a record-breaking venture year. Alberta had a record-breaking venture year. Canada did. Calgary did. It's been in the media quite a bit, which is awesome. Like, money is coming into Calgary, and it's coming into Alberta, and it's coming into Canada. We are a destination. U.S. venture firms are coming to Canada to look at the companies that we're building here. They're recruiting talent from up here. Canada is becoming a destination. But these are the statistics. So if you look at global venture funding, in 2020, 2.3% went to women-led companies. In 2021, it dropped down to 2.2. In 2019, it was 2.8. And yeah, these stats are real. Serena Williams actually just launched a fund. It was in the media. And she talked about the first time that she heard that 2% of all global venture funding goes to women, she was like, okay, that's a mistake. I'm going to go talk to the speaker that just told me that. There's something wrong. No, that is the statistic. So she created a venture fund to fund women, Black entrepreneurs. So this is a huge financial opportunity. So if we think about it, today women are on the journey of controlling 65% of the wealth, but nobody's investing in us. So if you want to become an influential consumer, start voting with your dollars. Who are you spending your money with? You're spending dollars are capital, just as much as investing. If you want to build the future as an entrepreneur, if you are a woman that's an entrepreneur and you are designing the world that you want to see, building the world that you want to see, you have a tremendous opportunity in front of you. If you look at healthcare, I don't know if you're aware of the statistics, but it wasn't until 1996 when women were allowed to be in clinical trials for drugs. 1996. And if you want to invest in the world you want to live in, come to the 51. But this is a huge opportunity. We control the spending, we're going to control the wealth, we can redesign the world, and it's an and, it's not an or. This economic revolution is only going to add GDP, is only going to add economic value. And so, yeah, 51% of the population, that's what we're doing. And that's it. And I thought I was doing questions now, but I'm not, so I'll stop talking. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelley. That's wonderful. I'm really glad to have you here as well and to provide a little bit of a unique perspective on the financial element. And we in this room probably get hear a lot of oil and gas and energy industry type of conversations. So it's really nice to have your perspective. Thank you. So our next speaker is sponsored by Colliers International. Colliers is a global commercial real estate services firm headquartered in Canada and is the largest operating in Alberta. Whether you're a tenant, landlord, developer, or investor, Colliers is committed to finding commercial real estate solutions for their partners in Calgary and beyond. So I'm really pleased to announce our third speaker, keynote speaker today, Moran. Mary is a committed community builder, and she's served on more than 50 nonprofit boards and committees. Now retired, she was the former president CEO of Calgary Economic Development, and she was president and CEO of Calgary, the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. During her tenure as the CEO, Mary led several key initiatives, probably a few that you've heard of, including Calgary in the New Economy, Calgary Be a Part of the Energy, the award-winning YYC is Open, and she also is part of the Amazon headquarter pitch. And she also served as CEO of the Calgary 2026 Winter Olympics and Paralympics Bid Corporation, making her the first CEO in history to lead the Games Bid organization. So I'd like to invite Mary. Thanks.
Thanks so much, and thank you to everybody for sticking it out. I know I'm between you and drinks or getting home or whatever the case may be, so I appreciate you being in the audience. And it's so lovely to see so many people, like, smile. It's fantastic. So, and Donovan and Scovan team, congratulations on another successful and very important event. And I would be remiss if I didn't extend a special thank you to Valerie Stewart, who is passionate and committed to ensuring that she supports women in leadership. Look at this theme. I can't believe how timely it is with respect to courage, break the bias. There is no question that we are witnessing intensification of social and political discourse. And it feels like our compass is a little bit off. Our biases are even more entrenched than they have been in the past. And we see that through various things like protests and convoys and an atrocious war. And at a micro level, at the workplace, people are disconnected and probably a bit disengaged and disenfranchised with this remote from work, not sure how to connect and create a social culture at work. It is definitely a tough time, but it's also a time of rapid change. And I think this is a great opportunity and probably one of the most important times in history for leaders, male and female, for them to take a stance on core values and principles, particularly as it relates to equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm super grateful to be here, to be able to tell you a little bit about my story, which is a little untraditional, but that's okay. And I hope that the stories and ideas that my esteemed co-presenters have shared with you will open your eyes and your minds and your hearts to thinking about how we all have a responsibility to break the bias and to overcome some of the troubles that we are facing today. And certainly from my perspective, from a very interesting upbringing to a rewarding career, I've had a range of experiences as it pertains to gender bias. And some are good and some are bad. Some are imposed by other people and some are self-imposed upon myself. But like all the other speakers, I've had lots of encouragement and support and inspiration along the way, and I am so grateful for that. But the person who inspired me the most was my mother. She was a formidable woman. She was 5 feet, 100 pounds, and she could hold an audience captive on any topic. She was a nurse by training, and she actually trained and worked in London, England during World War II. Now, nursing wasn't her first career choice. She actually wanted to be a pharmacist, but the convent that she went to didn't allow women to take Latin, so her dreams were quickly crushed. But she went on to have a very successful career as a nurse, And then she went on to be a college teacher and retiring at the age of 75. She truly had a profound impact on everybody that she met, friends, family, students. And she married my dad when my mom was 35 and my dad was 25. That was very unheard of in those days. In the following 6 years, they had 5 kids, 4 boys and me, and I was the youngest. So needless to say that I had a pretty tough upbringing. And when I mean tough, I don't mean that we didn't have food on the table or it was an abusive home, but it was intensely competitive and male-oriented. Now, my parents, especially my mom, really encouraged me to compete with the boys. She told me I was equal from a very young age. And my brothers, for the most part, treated me as an equal. In fact, they kind of relied on me. One time, my brother, one of the twins, was being bullied by one of the neighborhood boys. And my dad, as parents did back in the 60s, told him to stand up for himself and fight back. Well, what did my brother Mike do? He marched into my room and said he needed help. Now, I adored my brother, so I didn't hesitate to help him. So there I was, a 40-pound punk, purposely outfitted in my black patent leather church shoes, walking arm in arm over to my neighbor to take on this neighborhood brute. I don't remember really much about the outcome of the fight, but I do remember the stories that were told after about me walking over there, laying on the ground, kicking my legs wildly, and pulverizing the young man's shins. As it turned out, 3 months later, he showed up at my birthday party with a lovely, lovely pink wallet and a sweet card. And I'm pretty sure that my parents sent me to confession that same weekend in those same black patent leather shoes. Now, seriously, growing up with 4 boys certainly equipped me to enter into the workplace. In fact, I'd say in my early days, I was very naive about gender bias or chose to ignore it. And certainly as my career progressed and I took on more responsibility and higher jobs, I started to notice it a little bit more. And I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm talking about in the last decade. In fact, I was appointed to an all-male board here in Calgary, 10 affluent men, and I showed up to the first meeting on time and prepared as usual. And this is how the meeting went. When I entered the room, one of them said, "Look who it is. It's our token female." That was 2015, I think. I didn't really know exactly how to respond to it. I was quite taken aback. So I sat down, took a breath, leaned back in the chair, put my arms up, you know the move, and I said, "Is anybody going to get me a coffee? Because I'll take it black." I think that it's obvious to say they were surprised by my mockery, but it set the boundaries, and it set it early. And I'm not going to advocate for women to have this elbow-up approach in the boardroom, but I would say I would advocate for women to set boundaries, set them early, particularly if they're in a male-dominant environment. Now, this tough upbringing was perpetuated by a career decades of a career in private sector. And I would say that my behavior was analogous to the Sunday dining room table, where I had to assert myself in order to be heard. But I think it came at a cost. If you've been attending these International Women's Day events, you've probably heard about the likability dilemma, where females, unlike males, are not normally perceived to be competent, strong, and likable. This isn't my feeling. This is actually fact. In fact, Columbia Business School conducted a study, maybe you've heard about it, about Heidi Roizen, who was a very successful venture capitalist out of Silicon Valley. And she did a case study And the prof decided to take the case study and change the name on the top of it to Howard Roizen. And he distributed both Heidi and Howard. I was going to say Heidi and Howdy, but that's the Olympics. Heidi and Howard's case study to the class. And he asked the class, we want you to assess both case studies on competency and likability. And interestingly, both the male and the female population of the class came back and said they were both very competent. But they didn't like Heidi. They thought that she was aggressive. And they thought that she was out for herself. And they said that they probably wouldn't hire her and they wouldn't work for her. Howard, on the other hand, they said they thought he'd be a great colleague. Why does this happen? This is amazing to me. I think that life should be like orchestra auditions, where we're always behind curtains and you're rewarded, or you're hired and promoted on your merit. Well, there's no question that gender stereotyping, that we have all been brought up to believe that women are kind, nurturing, supportive, and indifferent. And men are decisive, they're aggressive or assertive, and they're strong, and they're competent. But when we see these leadership skills that we like so much in women, we don't find these qualities necessarily likable. And I've spent a lot of time reflecting on this, and I think that it's fantastic that Jeanette Manyguns and all the other women are here tonight, because I had an aha moment during the summer when I was taking the Indigenous Canada course, and I was struck by the Indigenous peoples' pre-colonization progressive view on gender, and particularly as it comes to two spirits. You know what I'm talking about, right? You correct me if I get this wrong. But this is when male and female engage in untraditional activities, work activities, and accomplishments. So women could easily be warriors. They could easily engage in war and hunting and become war leaders and chiefs. And men who were of second spirit or second spirit males would often engage in beading and weaving, and typically would become healers. I think we actually have a lot to learn from the Indigenous community about gender norms and how it applies in the workplace. Now, I like this saying, which was, and oh, did I advance this already? Oh gosh, sorry you guys. But this saying I really like, and I think it's something for us to consider, which is, it is time that we all see gender as a spectrum instead of seeing two sets of opposing ideas. I couldn't agree more, and I think it's most applicable in the workplace. Now, I strongly believe, actually I know, that in order to break the gender bias, that we have to have a stronger voice. And not just a stronger voice like Kirsten referred to in the boardroom, but we actually have to have a stronger voice in media. And why do I say that? Well, whether we like it or not, as members of mass society, we are still very, very dependent upon media to keep informed about our communities, our country, and and the world. And the problem with media is women have a very weak voice. And although it's getting better, it's still not that great. And when a company called Informed Opinion, which I think is a very good name, researched this, they found out that in the 90s, it was because the media outlets were populated by men who had Rolodexes stuffed with male leaders' names. And so they would call them for quotes. And over time, you would think that this would change, with more women graduating out of journalism school and more women being in the C-suites. But the reality is, it's moving very slowly. And when Informed Opinions asked women why they wouldn't speak up in the media, they said the following things. I don't think I'm as qualified as my male counterpart, and typically handed the media interview off. I don't have time to prepare. I can guarantee you that some of the men that go into media don't prepare. And they're really afraid of being misrepresented or misquoted in the media. Now, I get that reticence. The media are tough on women. There is no question about that. You may recognize that person. That's me. This picture was actually circulating in a reputable national media outlet, published, by the way, when the Olympic Committee went to City Council and were relentlessly peppered with questions for 8.5 hours. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. 8.5 hours in front of City Council is an exhausting exercise. My lips were dry. I was licking my lips. But the media outlet decided that this was the most appropriate picture to depict the fact that we had victory and overturned the City Council's decision to halt the bid before the plebiscite. It's imperative, and I know that media are tough, and they're tough on everybody, but they're particularly tough on women because they tend to go into things like appearance, hair, the outfit. In fact, the Report on Business one day called me inconspicuously fit. I'm not sure what that had to do with the economy, but I hope it helped you. Look, I honestly, when I saw that photo, I made a greater commitment to put my voice out there. Now there's a fine line between tenacity and stupidity, and I'll let you decide which side I sit on. But the reality is I knew that I had to get my voice out there. So when I went back to Calgary Economic Development, I made it a mission. And I made it a mission because I really believed in the diversity strategy for Calgary and the fact that we had to take on really tough topics. Topics such as the tech skills mismatch in this city that's preventing companies from growing. The fact that we are overbuilt in this downtown core to the extent it could support a population of 4 million people. And the fact that the sentiment of Calgary and Alberta was deteriorating across the country and around the world. I'm not going to lie to you, I got hate mail. I was slagged on social media. I even got uninvited to Christmas cocktail parties. But I didn't give up, and part of it was because I knew in my heart of hearts it was the right thing to do. And the reward came when there were more people in the diversification parade. And the reward came when younger people would come to me and say, the Calgary that you talk about is the city that I can see myself living in. A greater perspective in media is going to change public perception. It's going to change policy, and it's going to change outcome. So I encourage you to let the women in your office and or for the women in the audience to put your hand up. You're more qualified than you think to speak on topics. And ask for help. Help is available through companies like Informed Opinions and Canada Powered by Women. I want to talk about support a little bit and get back to my mom. So my mom, although she really valued the fact that I embraced gender equity, and she valued the fact my brothers did as well, but she was really, really worried that I was going to become a tomboy. I didn't, by the way. Part of the reason I didn't is because my mom decided to put me into figure skating, where in my formative years, I was judged by a panel of experts. Well, I can tell you, being in a judgment sport is not an easy task. You start to form some self-biases about yourself, that you must work harder than anybody else, that you must strive for perfection, that you must not fail, and ultimately that you must win. Donovan, I don't want to scare you with your daughter, but it's true. This is a general statement, but I can tell you that self-compassion isn't plentiful in judgment sports like skating and gymnastics, where your performance is dependent upon you and somebody is going to determine what your success or your failure is. Now I'm going to fast forward a couple of decades, and I've had the good fortune of skating on a synchronized skating team. Most of you probably don't know what that is. But as an adult, I skate with 16 skaters with varied backgrounds, very varied professions, and varied beliefs. We're age range from 19 well, to me, and I swear I'm older than some of their grandmothers. But this team has taught me so much about that it's not about the win, that it's about the journey, and that you have to check your self-biases. In fact, that team rarely cares if you fall, because falling is a numbers game. Everybody's going to do it anyway. They usually rally around you if you fall. And part of the reason is because they believe that the journey is about training together, traveling together, and having fun together. And as a result, you probably have greater success. My friend Willie Littlechild from Treaty 6 taught me a word, a Cree word, that he uses to describe the truth and reconciliation journey of the Indigenous people. It's called up and to win. And up and to win means lifting each other up. We have a long way to go to lifting each other up in the workplace. The data speaks for itself. We have this huge gap with respect to mentorship. A recent study in the US showed that tech companies who offered mentorship programs for women actually promoted, or they increased their promotion and retention of women by up to 38%. But more shockingly, 67% of the women surveyed said that mentorship is going to be key to their success. However, only 10% took place in an employee-based mentorship program. What an opportunity for us to embrace up and to win and support, participate, and create mentorship programs for women. I have exactly 3 seconds left, but I'm going to carry on if you don't mind, and I promise I'll buy you all a free drink at the bar. But I want to close by saying, look, I'm not disillusioned by the fact that it takes a heck of a lot of courage by a lot of people to break the bias and pave the way, a smoother road for women and, frankly, other visible and self-identified minority groups that are on a similar journey. My mom taught me about courage. She was a courageous woman. And she taught me, her courage was based on the fact that she really went through life not having regrets. She really believed you can't go through life with regrets about the things that you didn't do. You just do them. So take the chance, take the risks. And I really encourage this group and anybody listening that we have to have the courage to break the bias when it comes to setting boundaries for women. We have to have the courage to breaking bias by challenging our gender norms, particularly in the workplace. And we have to have the courage to break the bias by speaking up or giving women the opportunity to speak in the media. And we have to have the courage to up and to win, to lift each other up, because we only get one chance. This is a massive change of time, and we have such a great opportunity, but we also have a responsibility to the generations that will follow us, to allow them to celebrate International Women's Day every day. Thank you very much.
Wow, thanks, Mary. That was really, really great to hear. I really appreciate that. We are going to kick off our panel portion of this event. So, before I do that, I do want to introduce our panel sponsor, which is Conacher Oil and Gas, and thank you for being our gold sponsor today. Conacher is focused on safety, minimizing the environmental footprint, and building lasting relationships. They believe that strong performance in health, safety, and environment is essential to achieving their business goals. They're focused on being a valued partner in local communities and industry programs while developing Alberta's energy resources responsibly. They have and continue to develop policies, programs, and strong governance practices to be consistent to set these objectives. For this next portion, we do invite our audience. We will be taking questions from the audience here. If you have a question, raise your hand and we'll try to get you a microphone or just speak loudly. And for those online virtually, you're welcome to provide your questions on slido, sli.do. And our hashtag is IWD YYC 2022. Okay. I just have to open my app. Well, let me just start with a couple questions and say thank you so much to all of you guys. That was a really riveting conversation and hearing those journeys. I really appreciated it. I've taken lots of notes. I do know you women individually, and with Mary and Kirsten and Shelley, I've gotten to know you, but really hearing your perspectives and your journey just makes me feel even more, appreciative of where you've come from and what you've done and what you've achieved during your career so far. I guess I wanted to start with a couple of things. And Kirsten, for you on, I love there's a couple of comments or themes that I heard around use your voice. So we heard that in your speech as well as in Mary's. And I believe that's so important that we're utilizing our voice, that women are being heard in media, in organizations, in the community, in the financial community. I certainly can empathize with that comment around feeling like we don't necessarily, if I don't have the answer 100%, I might not put my hand up. I might not say anything. I might sit back and let somebody else say it. And then another person I'll find will say exactly what I was thinking in a boardroom. I'm like, well, I should have just said that. Like, why didn't I say that? So, I find that we do sort of hold ourselves back sometimes and feeling like we don't have all the answers, but there was certainly a great point around just go for it. Do you have any other comments around that or anything you can share around your experiences with having your, voicing your opinion or speaking your voice?
I think, hello. I think it's just, around the theme of courage is just that it's okay to be wrong. And that it's, I think it's okay to screw up. It's okay to put out an idea because, as I was mentioning earlier, it may spark something. We don't have to be the winners. If we're working together collaboratively to solve a problem or find a solution on something, you don't have to be the one that has the answer. But I think if you're okay to take the risk and throw your ideas into the mix, then ultimately, as a group, you'll find that solution. I never get the right answer.
Well, and I like how you said too. It's called collaboration,
yeah.
Right? And that it'll spur continuous ideas throughout within your group, and then get you all holistically to perhaps a new solution. Mary, do you have any other comments on that?
Well, sure. I'll tell you a quick story, which I know you're not going to believe is going to be quick, but Sherry Graydon, who runs this company called Informed Opinions, who's now moved to Calgary, used to be in Ottawa, she uses this example about how she was walking in Montreal the day the Pope died. And she was outside the church, the Basilica, and in Montreal, and one of the news outlets stopped her and said, "Do you have any comments?" And she said, "No, I don't have any comments." And her husband was asked then. The reporters asked her husband, and he said, "It's a sad day for Catholics everywhere." And they kept walking after he did the report, and she was like, she worked in the media, by the way, and she said, "That was kind of a ridiculous comment to make. Wasn't that kind of obvious?" And he goes, "Well, what would you have said?" And she goes, "Well, I probably would have said, well, I hope the Pope has more progressive ideas and concepts on contraception and that women around the world aren't disenfranchised for the rest of their lives." And of course, that was a pretty profound thing to say. And her recognition, she's the one who did all this research about why women don't participate in media. And she basically didn't want to do it because she didn't think she was informed. Her husband hadn't been to church in 40 years. And so he felt like he was qualified to speak with it. And so I think it's just a confidence thing that men naturally come with that women don't. And I do think it's attached to exactly what Kirsten said about that fear of failure, right? Or that fear of not being right. But sometimes you have to take a chance. Look, I have misquoted, said things incorrectly in media, but over the long run, the gist of the point gets across, right? And so you just, we need to ride with it a little bit.
Oh, I love that. So I have another question for you, Shelley. I love what you were talking about around working on using your strengths. Work towards your strengths because they really are your superpowers. And I think particularly that's important for women because women get so caught up in where they're not quite right or they're not 100% knowledgeable or more self-conscious potentially on and how they approach their business. But if we turn that around and we turn that lens around and said, why don't we focus on our strengths and our superpowers, then you can really elevate yourself to a whole other level as well and contribute to where you're best. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think it's about surrounding yourself with people more talented than yourself. So you might be really good at something, but there's going to be a room full of people that are really good at all of the other things that need to get done. So I think trying to be good at everything isn't a good strategy, and it's not inclusive. It doesn't bring everyone's participation into the solution or the collaboration, as you were talking about. So, I think focus on your strengths, and if you really hone those skills, and now I'm losing my voice, they really can become your superpowers. You can be known for something, and then that becomes your rally cry. That becomes the thing that leads others to action. And then you look at your colleagues and you go, well, I love figuring that out on a team dynamic. It's like, what are each individual's strengths around the table? And then just creating a platform for people to be the best version of themselves. Yeah. So again, compliment yourself.
I love that. Anyone else comments on that?
Ditto.
Another thing I wanted to touch on was trying new things and just really embracing challenge. And I heard this too across both, a few of the presentations here tonight, trying new things, not being afraid, don't be a quitter, and kind of feed your curiosity. I mean, Shelley, for you, you started your business clothing line at a, I guess, later on in your career.
Old age. It's fine, you can say that.
How do I put that? But that's really incredible. It's something that you always wanted to do, and you didn't, hold yourself back from that, and continuing to kind of entrust in yourself that you can do it. And same with you, Kirsten, around, some of those were your comments too, around, feeding your curiosity and embracing challenge throughout your career. Can you guys tell a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, life is short. If you find out that you're doing something or you don't enjoy, or you're with people you don't enjoy, I mean, that's just destined for failure. And so, things are going to be, projects are going to be tough. There's always going to be challenges, but if you're surrounded by, good people and interesting work, then you can bite in, you can get through it. You're having fun while you're working through those challenges, and yeah, that's key. Have a good time.
I like that. Thank you. Did you have any other comments? Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, yes, we've got one back here.
Hi. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. What helped you guys move forward so that you can ask for this better? Like, you guys are obviously quite successful and it's amazing. What drove you guys to become that?
I can kick off. I kind of on the last one, working with good people. I think that, any of the successes or advancements I had was because I was supported by good people that wanted and believed in me, and I had a seat at the table and pulled me along. I think that had I not had those great mentors and those people that thought that I deserved to be there, that it would have been a lot harder. And that's my comment.
I think I would go back to one of the points that I spoke to before and just restate it. I think just wanting things to be better or different, like just, solutioning to a better version of whatever you're working on. I think for me, that's the biggest driver, not being happy with the way it is. So I think that's where, kind of my innovation is probably driven from. And again, you need, a team of people to do that. But I think it's just, we can be better. We can be better at everything that we do, and new companies can come out of it, new ideas, new products. And so really challenging ourselves to be better.
That's a great question and complicated. I think a couple of things. I think I've worked for love all my life because I've always, I didn't really care about salary. I really cared about the jobs that I worked on. And I think having the curiosity to learn and problem solve is really what has driven me. And I've had a big black cloud hanging over my career my entire life, in the sense of I worked in the airline industry for many years, not a fun industry, I'm telling you. Went through 7 mergers, had to open a hotel in Whistler in 14 weeks, and you sell resort destinations 18 months out. Was the CEO of Calgary Economic Development in the 6 worst years of this economy's history. Took on the Olympic bid with 12 weeks left. It was like being dealt a pair of twos in a high-stakes game. I like the fire, and I think I learn a lot by the fire. And I've done so many things wrong, it's not even funny. We don't have enough time tonight to talk about the things that I've done wrong, but I think I've learned from those things that I've done wrong. And so I just am so motivated to learn, solve problems, and learn from my mistakes. So thanks for asking the question. I forgot about the bankruptcy. I forgot about that part.
We all have one of those, right?
I also heard about representation, and I know I talked about representation, but I saw that in some of the themes of your speeches around making sure that there's also, that women are represented, whether it's in media or within your industry, in your businesses, in the investment community. It's just so critical and important for women to see other women in those roles. I recall when I was starting work and I was living in Toronto and I was working for a national entertainment company, which I was fortunate to have a lot of women leaders in that company. But I was just out of university and I hadn't started a family yet, but I knew that was something that I wanted. So I quietly surveyed all the female leaders and took stock of, well, how many of those women are married and have children? And the number was quite small. It was under 10%. But I made sure that I made an alliance with those women and understood a little bit about how they did it. I just wanted to know that you could do both, because that's, for me, what I wanted to do. And so that helped drive me and kept me going to pursue my career and then have a family of 3 beautiful children. So I feel fortunate in that. And so how would you recommend, or your comments around that, around just representation or giving women the opportunity to be in roles, or just having that overall representation in industry?
I've got a story. So until we see 51% representation everywhere, I would say try to use being unique or standing out as a low minority as an advantage, because there's the opportunity to shine. I had that one slide where me with all the miners and all the men, and I was the one woman. And in some ways, it was an advantage, because when we go to these mining conferences, it would just be a sea of middle-aged men in black suits and salt and pepper hair, and I was the only one of, I shouldn't say, but I was one of the few female geologists that were there telling the story and being the person at the booth who they thought was, not just, maybe didn't realize that I was the geologist in charge of the project. And so I think it helped me in a weird way that I got remembered and I was able to use that. So until we get there to 51, try to spin it to your advantage.
And maybe I'll build on that. I think representation takes work. It's not just going to happen. We won't have equity, diversity, and inclusion by putting it on our letterhead or creating signs in our office or putting posters on the wall or whatever it is. Like, it's going to take a ton of work. We have to work on it every day. And so I would just build on that and just say, like, we have to work on it. When we look at the statistic that I brought up earlier around 2.2%, that's a rally cry. That's like, that is the state right now. So let's change it. And so, yeah, I would just say we got to work on representation. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that in the sense that, look at, and by the way, I'm somewhat ill or not qualified to speak of this because I don't have kids. So, my career was about working all the time. Frankly, I just actually had that DNA of, I was a workaholic. And by the way, I don't miss the frenetic pace of 55 meetings a week, or 55 meetings a week. I was going to say a day, but that's actually impossible, isn't it? But I would just say this, and it's one thing. So, when people talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, I really get concerned about tokenism. And I really get concerned about it. The easy part of it is diversity in the sense of checking boxes and filling spots with people. But equity and inclusion are really much harder to do. And I think we really have to make a conscious effort to ensure that have programs of allowing people working in where they are, where and when they're most effective, as opposed to presenteeism. So if you're a mom and you have to come in at 9:30 because you're dropping the kids off, so be it, as long as you get your work done, right? So don't judge people for leaving at 3 o'clock to pick their kids up or coming in at 9:30. I think leaders have a real opportunity, and leaders have the biggest statement they can make is with respect to equity, and equity of compensation sends the best message to the organization on how your philosophy on how you as a leader approach equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Yeah, and that makes me think of a cool story that came out of the UK this morning around companies tweeting about EDI. So, International Women's Day, we're an EDI company. And there was a bot on social media that would automatically retweet that tweet and expose the pay gap at that company. And so very quickly people started to take down the tweets, or they weren't doing the tweets, but the data was still out there because they were retweeting who was saying they were an EDI company. So yeah, it's going to take work to actually show up.
Yeah, and it's evolving, right? So I think have to be constantly listening and learning, right? I think what we've learned about truth and reconciliation in the last 5 years has been remarkable to me. And if anybody hasn't taken it, I really highly recommend the Indigenous Canada free 12-week online course, and you get graded on it if that's meaningful to you. But it's super interesting. I learned so much, of which I don't even know why I didn't learn this in grade school. I mean, it's so ridiculous. We've learned so much about Black Lives Matter, but it will be something different next year. And so we have to be open to listening and learning.
Thank you. I always wish we had more time for this portion because it's my favorite part. But I would think we can take one more question from the audience. Does anyone have another question? Yes.
I was going to ask how you guys, when you are speaking out and taking those chances, how do you deal with when you do fail and there's moments where it goes wrong and you're left standing there like, where do I go from here? So how do you deal with that?
Laugh nervously and change the subject.
It's tough. I mean, I think, we can kind of, bullshit our way and say, oh, we just took it on the chin and we kept going. But they're brutal. And I think women are evaluated to a different standard. So when we fail, we really fail. So I think, like, learn from it, try to move on from it. And I would say, like, find your people that are, believers of you in good times and bad times.
Yeah, and is there time to add to that? I think this is a critical question, right? Because it is not easy for anybody to fail. And as I said to you earlier, when you're in a judgment sport, it is really hard. You are so hard. My mother used to call it self-persecution, that I was the best at it. She wished there was a gold medal at the Olympics for that. I'll tell you that much, because I would have won it. But it's having people around you that you can gather evidence that you're okay, that you're a good person, that you've done the right thing, that you tried. I was going to share a story about the Olympics, the past Olympics, the 2022 Olympics, but I decided not to because it's actually quite a confidential. But there was somebody there that stepped into a role and failed miserably, and the mental angst that person suffered for just trying something that they weren't expecting to go to the Olympics to do was devastating for that person. And so it's really important for that person the sports psychologist advised that person to collect the evidence and listen to other voices that you don't typically listen to that will tell you otherwise. Does that make sense to you?
Thank you. I do want to take one more question that was provided on the Slido. So Shelley mentioned that she learned how to hire a team as part of her entrepreneurial journey. Any hiring tips?
I'm not allowed in the HR department, so I probably you have to take this advice. I think the one thing that I would say about hiring a team today is that you can't go back inside of your existing networks over and over again. Not because there's not talented people there, but you have to work really hard on representation. And so that means that you have to make sure that there's no bias in your hiring practices. And we can say we don't have bias. We all have bias. So I would say that you have to recruit talent differently. You have to grow talent differently. It's a new world, and representation matters. It counts, and it will be your differentiator. So I think that's what yeah.
Go ahead.
I love getting more people involved in the hiring process. Like, I would hire people, but I'd let everybody else interview them before I got to them. Because I didn't want my bias to affect it. And so if you have multiple people, if you wanted to work on my senior management team, the whole senior management team got to interview you, and they would come with their top 3 choices, and then I would decide who I would interview. But I also look for that kind of perfect person that has great vision, that loves to get stuff done, and loves to have fun along the way. And the person right in the middle is the person think of that Venn diagram. The person in the middle is the person that I want working alongside of.
Yeah, I really like that. We talked a little bit about this maybe a couple of years ago, but there's just so many self-conscious biases or unconscious biases, when we're in our hiring practices, and we really try our best to look outside of our norms. But the first thing we'll do is, okay, well, who do we know within our networks? So we kind of continue to build from our existing networks still, which makes sense because those are individuals you trust, you have experience with, and that they'll, you've seen them perform and that they'll succeed. And so this is a really natural place to go. So I don't think that's wrong in any sense of the matter, but we're probably also just eliminating another portion, though, of that population without even think of it. And sometimes we'll say, okay, well, let's look at let's get a list of some individuals, and there typically is 10 male names that are provided, and none of them are women. So we need to be conscious of saying, how do we then make sure we're representational in hiring?
Blind resumes.
Blind resumes, yeah.
Take the name off. Doesn't matter what their background is. you know, what their gender is. I think it's the best way to go.
Right.
It's like the orchestra audition behind the curtain.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, we're out of time right now, but I just do want to close off with a couple of things. Thank you so much for that today, you guys. That was wonderful. Hannah, can I get you to come up and help me? Thank you. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that session here live and also virtually and in our virtual space. This is such a treat to be able to spend our time doing this. And I think treat this as a gift for yourselves to take that time to really be conscious, spending some conscious time considering and thinking about these issues. And I hope that you can take something away from this for yourselves, share it with your teammates, with your family, with your friends, and have some of those really dynamic and interesting conversations. For me, I've been doing that as I've been planning this with my girlfriends and my family, and it's just helped to, really build that conversation within our communities. So I hope that that's done a little bit for you today. First off, we have some speaker gifts. We have some gifts for our speakers, so I'd like to give that to you guys as a token of our appreciation for you being here today. We've got some lovely gifts. It's a Joy Drop Direct Her necklace, and it's a collaboration pendant. It's called Making Waves, so it's pendant with female hair kind of making waves. I don't have a picture of it, so you just imagine it. And so it represents the importance of diverse women voices in leadership, especially at the board table. So each purchase of this pendant provides $50 to support Direct Her Network. It's a Canadian charity empowering an expanded pool of women to become board directors sooner. So thank you. And also, thank you to our speakers. To our speakers and our sponsors. Our gold sponsors were Intrepid Group, PTW, Colliers, and Conacher. Our silver sponsors were Spartan, Meg Energy, DCM Group, and Mergin Law. I see you guys all here. Hi. Bronze sponsors, AES, Gemini, Drishia AI, and Starbelly, who's provided the food for us today. But before we wrap up, I have some draw prizes, and the audience must be in attendance to get your prize. So otherwise we'll just keep drawing. So we have 2 gift cards to the Starbelly Group. Jennifer Turner, are you here? No, we'll do one more. She's here? I didn't see anyone. Is there? Okay. And Lori Nechka? Not here? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Stacey Ann Duncan. Yay, I know you. Come grab the gift. I'll take some more. Yeah, thanks. Margaret Cargod? Yes. And one more. And the last is a signed Monahan jersey from the Calgary Sports and Entertainment Group. Michelle. Well, thank you, everyone. We do have, invite you to our reception portion of this event. So we have some food sponsored by Starbelly and some cocktails and some music and networking. So please do stay with us. And we also have taxi chits available as you leave. So this closes our formal event of the evening. And thank you so much again for your time and time and being here today. Thank you very much. Have a good night.